How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the first Marvel Cinematic Universe What If on this channel. I'm a huge fan of Marvel, and while Marvel is indeed coming up with their own What If series, I'd like to do some of my own that I don't really think they'll do. This What If included. That being, what if Spider-Man survived the snap? This one was the first MCU What If I was suggested, meaning we're going to see how this would change the events of the MCU. Before we begin, huge shout out to all of my patrons. We have Dreadpool, Patrick Sandlin, Mr. Darkness, Josiah Calderon, John Lister, Jared, Robert Gregory, and Andy. You guys supporting me means so much. Anyways, let's dive right into this What If. We begin this story with the ending of Infinity War. Thanos has gotten all of the Infinity Stones, snapped his fingers, and half of all life in the universe has been wiped out. On Titan, though, we have an extra survivor, Peter Parker. Peter is terrified by the Guardians and Doctor Strange disappearing, and asks Mr. Stark what is happening. Tony looks over to Nebula, who says that
He did it.
Of course, these three mourn, but Tony doesn't mourn as much as he would have, since this time he didn't actually lose Peter. Still horrible that he wasn't able to save the others, though. Eventually, the three take the Guardian ship and try to return to Earth. Of course, the three try to bond, with Nebula taking a liking to Peter due to how funny he is. Once the ship begins to start slowing down and losing power, Peter is able to help out Tony and Nebula in fixing the ship, since he's a super genius as well. Of course, even though he's a genius, even he isn't going to be able to be much help in getting the ship 100% repaired. He is going to help have the ship last a little bit longer though, which has them get a little bit closer to Earth, but not by much. The main problem for these three now is the food and water shortage, as they could barely survive with two getting food, so with three people, and one of them being a teenager at that, the food will go out much faster. Tony wouldn't eat much at all, and Peter wouldn't much either. Peter would last a little longer due to his stronger cells, and would try his best to take care of Tony when he gets more and more fatigued. Luckily though, since they are closer to Earth, Captain Marvel finds him faster, and they are all saved. When they make it back to Earth, Tony is in complete critical condition, since he didn't have as much food as he would have originally, and he isn't even able to talk. So he's rushed down to the emergency room, with Peter in tow. Peter asks the remaining Avengers about his Aunt May, Ned, MJ, all of his friends, and if they're alright. They don't quite know about his friends yet, but they tell him that his aunt is gone. Peter is devastated, as his only real family is all gone now. His aunt and his friends are all gone. And who knows if Mr. Stark is going to make it. Tony is too weak to have his fight with Cap to the extent that he did originally, though they have a similar conversation. Once the plan to go after Thanos is formulated, Peter isn't himself. He never wants to kill anybody, it's just not who he is. But this Thanos, he ruined everything. His aunt and his friends, all gone. He needs to pay. Captain America would probably want Peter to stay behind, but Peter would snap at the Captain, saying he managed to get some good hits on Thanos, unlike most of everybody in this room. He can help. Nebula would back Peter up, as she did see Peter do a better job than even most of the Guardians. Peter is brought along and the Avengers head off to go battle Thanos. Even with Peter around, this outcome would end the same, as he's just another person to hold Thanos down. Thor would kill Thanos, and with the Infinity Stones gone, this means that nobody is going to be brought back. This news devastates everybody, and Peter more, as even with Thanos gone, the dead aren't going to be coming back. The Avengers return to Earth, with Peter being one who has nowhere to go. He would return to Queens to search for anybody left, any of his friends, though he finds nothing. No Aunt May, no Ned, no MJ, not even Flash is around. It seems all of his school friends were victims to Thanos. He really is left with nothing here. With a heavy heart, Peter leaves his city behind and is taken in by the Avengers. We move into the 5-year time gap, with Peter not just wallowing in self-pity like the rest of the Avengers either. He is still close with Tony, of course, and explains to him how they all have to move on in one way or another. And the only way he can think to do that is for Spider-Man to return to Queens and help out the survivors there, to at least let them know that there's a hero around to save them. Tony understands Peter's reasonings, and what a mature decision it is to return to hero work. It's something even he can't do. Tony lets Peter use his tech for him to create his own Spider-Man suit, which turns into the one that he would make in Far From Home. Spider-Man returns to New York with a new apartment he is given by Stark Industries. Luckily, Spider-Man's return is something that lets the people of New York breathe a little easier. Sure, life is terrible for everybody, but there's that small glimmer of hope that is Spider-Man, trying his hardest to spread hope to those remaining. I don't think Spider-Man will meet any new big bads quite yet, as most of them are all probably dead. Mysterio might be gone, and though it is confirmed right now that Doc Ock and Electro are around somewhere, We don't know anything about the MCU version of these characters, so I'm just going to leave them out of the story for now. Meaning that Peter gets to be Spider-Man without a huge big bad for around 5 years. The only villains he really faces are a bunch of prisoners that escaped due to the snap, and a bunch of petty criminals. Peter was also around 17 years old during Infinity War, meaning after the 5 years, he ages up to around 21 or 22. He wouldn't really look like regular Tom Holland anymore since he's older. So to really show the passage of time, I'm gonna say Peter looks more like how he did in the Spider-Man PlayStation 4 game. He would have a new Spider-Man costume obviously, since he can't keep the Far From Home one forever. It might match a PS4 one too, since we're already using a new face now. Peter would probably just work as a scientist for Stark Industries now to get a good job. It helps him out a lot since Tony would always make sure he has enough money to support himself. And he can still go out and be Spider-Man. These 5 years haven't been the easiest for Peter, but he certainly has been trying to do the best he can during this time, and keep the hope for the people in New York. He misses his friends each and every day, but he knows there's nothing he can do to bring them back, so he doesn't dwell on finding a solution by himself. Though one day, bringing everybody back might actually be a possibility. He is visited by people he hasn't seen in quite a while. Captain America, Black Widow, and Ant-Man? Wait, wasn't he snapped away 5 years ago? How is he here? Scott tells Peter that he was trapped in the quantum realm for 5 years, and that they are trying to find a secret for time travel. Peter is shocked. Like, time travel? Like Back to the Future time travel? Doctor Who? Steve says that they went to visit Tony and ask for some help from him, but they didn't get any, and the only person who he'll really listen to about this is him. If Peter can get through to him, then maybe he'll have a chance to bring everybody back. Peter drops everything he's doing, puts on his suit, and swings his way over to where Tony is, to try and convince him. Tony and Peter have a long conversation, as Peter says that while he is happy that Tony has his family now, and he loves having a little sister figure in his life, he has to think about how this will affect the planet. His aunt, his friends, everybody's families, they'll all come back, and he can't be selfish now and let the whole world down. Peter does eventually get through to Tony, and they both work that night to perfect the art of time travel. Once that is completed, they return to the Avengers compound, put the team back together, and decide where to go to get the stones. This would go somewhat as normal, with just Peter being around cracking more jokes with Scott, and the 3 teams are formed to go and find the stones. Peter will go along with Tony, Steve, Hulk, and Scott. As with his actual superpowers, he could help Tony and Scott if they need it. The time heist commences with the New York team going back in time to 2012. Peter tags along with Tony and Scott going after a Tesseract, with Peter using a stealth suit that Tony designed. That way he doesn't alert the alarms in the tower. Plus, Peter is totally geeking out being able to see the Avengers all fighting together for the first time, as he was forced to stay home when he was a boy, rather than watch a battle himself. The events with the Tesseract happen mostly as normal, up until when Tony and Peter begin to walk away with the Tesseract. Once Hulk knocks away Tony and the Tesseract pops up next to Loki, Peter thinks fast and he launches a web at the Tesseract and brings it back over to them. Scott runs back over to Peter, and he picks up Tony, and they quickly swing out of the building. Luckily with Peter around, Loki was never able to escape with the Tesseract, which won't be good for the Loki series, but it's good for our heroes right now. Since they were successful as well, there's no need to go back to the 70s. This is a good and bad thing, as they don't need to waste more Pym particles, but Tony will never reconnect with his dad, which is pretty sad. The group returned to the present, with the news of Natasha's death hitting everybody really hard. Peter, of course, is sad, but he didn't know her super well, so this isn't a super hard loss for him at least. The new Infinity Gauntlet is created, and everything else pretty much plays out the same from here. Thanos is still brought back, and even with an older and more experienced Spider-Man here, he can't defeat Thanos by himself. And Iron Man still sacrifices himself to save the universe. Now this death of course is devastating to Peter, as Mr. Stark was his mentor and friend, and now he's gone too. Peter mourns along with the other Avengers over his fallen friend, and Endgame wraps up as normal. Once the battle is over, Peter instantly goes to see his Aunt May again, and cries into her arms, so happy to see her. Aunt May is of course extremely shocked, as Peter is so much older now. She can tell it's him, but it's certainly also hard to tell. Her little Parker is all grown up. She is also surprised that he has his own place, and since her home was taken over by an older lady, she just goes to move in with Peter in his new place. Peter also gets to see Ned again. Ned of course is tweaking out over seeing Peter as he's so much older. And he has his own place, and a new Spider-Man costume? That's amazing and terrifying. He's been done school for years now, and he has to retake it again? That's not quite fair. Peter also isn't going to be going after MJ anymore. He's very happy to see her again, but now he doesn't see her in a romantic way, as he's a lot older than she is now. This pretty much means that she's never going to find out he's Spider-Man, as she doesn't have any easy way to stalk him anymore. At Tony's funeral, Nick Fury actually goes up to Peter this time, and gives him the Edith glasses, as Tony wanted to give these to him in case he didn't make it. For the next Tony Stark, he chose Peter. Even with Tony's gone, Peter's life actually gets a whole lot better. He has his best friend back, and while he is much younger than he is now, he will still obviously hang out with him, of course. Having his aunt back and his best friend back is all Peter ever wanted, and being able to have that is perfect for him. When we move on to the events of Far From Home, things are of course going to go very differently. Ned and the others at his school are going to go on vacation to Europe, and Peter can't go because he's not in school anymore, obviously. Mysterio still wants to get to Edith classes though, and he's not going to let this plan go to waste. Mysterio doesn't hijack the vacation as he has no reason to, but he starts to unleash the elementals around New York, and Nick Fury recruits Spider-Man to help him out. Luckily, this time when fighting the elementals, Peter has his spider sense completely. As over these 5 years of Spider-Manning, he has pretty much perfected his power, so he can sense that something is wrong with these monsters. He can still sense a huge threat, but it's a lot of tiny threats instead of one big monster. What's up with that? Peter's able to find out pretty fast by fighting with the elementals that they are all illusions, and Mysterio is very worried that this will be the end of him, and he stupidly goes to run away. Peter stops him by webbing him up, and he's arrested by Nick Fury. Unfortunately, Mysterio knows who Spider-Man is, and he's not like the Vulture, he'll tell everybody to save himself. So Nick Fury doesn't bring him to any old prison. He's locked up in a S.H.I.E.L.D. prison. That way Peter's secret is safe. With Mysterio out of the way much sooner and much easier, the events of a very different Far From Home are wrapped up. Mysterio wasn't really a threat since Spider-Man is the perfect Spider-Man at this point, due to those 5 years to really hone in his abilities. Nobody ever really finds out that Peter is Spider-Man either, since the video was never created revealing his secret, meaning Peter can continue going around and being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Overall, Peter not being snapped away ended up working out for him at the end, as sure he's much older than his friends now, but he's still got his friends with him, and he's now his own person Spider-Man, and not just Iron Boy Jr. He's really grown into his own, and he'll continue to go around as a 22-year-old Spider-Man protecting the neighborhood. Just without a girlfriend. Hey, maybe he can end up with an older Gwen though, you never know. Anyways, that's all for this video, and I hope you enjoyed the story of what would have happened if Spider-Man was never snapped away. Thank you all so much for watching, and let me know if you guys would like me to continue these MCU what-ifs down below in the comments. I've got a whole lot more planned for you guys, and I hope you'll be happy to watch them. So, until we meet again you guys, see you later.